Hey everyone, welcome to ironSource's latest Level Up webinar. My name is Jasmine and I'm from ironSource's marketing team. Nimrod Zuta, VP Product at ironSource, is going to be hosting today's webinar, along with our guests Mark Milowski from Facebook Audience Network and Rahul Ravindranath from Amanotes. We're going to cover tips for setting up hybrid bidding waterfalls and best practices for driving maximum revenue with in-app bidding. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a few seconds to tell you a bit more about what we're doing here at ironSource. ironSource is developing the industry's leading growth platform for mobile games. And what makes our platform unique is that our products close the marketing and monetization loop to help you accelerate your game's growth. If you want to check out our past webinars, they're available on demand at ironsrc.com/levelup/webinars. There are about a dozen more webinars just like this one with actionable tips. Also, as you may have seen in our promotions, we're running a special bonus today for this webinar. I'm going to add a link in the chat in a bit to a form, and filling out that form is going to fast track activating Facebook Audience Network as a bidder on ironSource's mediation. So if that's something you're interested in doing, be sure to fill out the form. Quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to start with in-app bidding from Facebook Audience Network's perspective, and then we'll move into how bidding came to be, how it works, and some tips for maximizing revenue and getting the most out of your in-app bidding strategy. And then finally, we're going to hear from Rahul from Amanotes about how he's using bidding to maximize his revenue. Last thing to note, Nimrod, Mark, and Rahul are all going to be taking questions at the end, so feel free to use the Q&A part of the webinar to ask your questions. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mark to get started.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Milowski. I'm a strategic partner manager working for the Audience Network and based in the London office. So I'm working with our different mediation partners in the region and specifically with the ironSource team. So today I'm just going to start and quickly discuss why we're doing bidding and what are the benefits of bidding for developers from the Facebook Audience Network perspective. If we can move to the next slide. So I'm going to explain a little bit the journey. We started bidding back in 2017 because we were seeing in the industry the success of header bidding on desktop and MWeb. We saw those publishers moving quickly to header bidding, to this new technology and making the industry more fair and generating more revenue through it as well. We thought it would be easy for us to implement it on in-app, and that's why we started in 2017 with our first in-house integration that's still available and known as Bidding Kit. And after the success of this integration, we started developing partnerships with different mediation platforms in the industry that are all sharing our vision for the move to bidding and for the industry, and also have agreed to the same code of conduct, which creates a fair, open, and efficient ecosystem. So we are now happy to count ironSource as our partner, and as we're working through the different go-to-market stages with them. So the mission overall in Audience Network, we believe that bidding creates a more fair, open, and efficient ad ecosystem that benefits the publishers, the advertisers, and the people. But in order to get there, we as an industry need to shift away from waterfall. And if we're moving to the next slide, I'm going to show exactly why the waterfall falls short today. Sorry. So let's compare waterfall and bidding. The first one, waterfall mediation, require publishers at server to call demand sources one by one, according to the average historical price, and is not based on who's willing to pay the most for each impression in real time. For publisher, the result is a missed opportunity to monetize and money is left on the table. For advertiser, it's a miss as well, as their decision to buy might be stuck behind a complex waterfall and they might not be able to show up the ad that they're willing to pay the most for. Bidding solves it by creating real-time competition where the highest price wins, simply. The second point is, over the last few years, months, we saw publishers, developers creating multiple ad calls for each ad format and OS, up to 15 per ad network, and trying to simply reproduce bidding. That's fair. This just created a very, very complex setup that reacts poorly to seasonality or any shifts in demand, but it's also not efficient for net new publishers that are willing to launch directly and testing ads because they don't know the historical value of the data and they have to go blind when they start running ads. So it's difficult to add and maintain those level and that granularity with the different placements. That's why bidding solves it by streamlining the support and creating and making an easier integration. Finally, bidding can reduce ad latency. This is because bidding gives publisher the ability to integrate as many demand sources as possible with minimum management. We avoid like the different calls to the waterfalls for the same networks. And we have seen on different publishers that bidding can reduce ad latency by 38% to 88%, depending on the publisher and the integration. So if we move to the next slide, the bidding adoption overall is growing. Over the last year, we've seen 7 times more apps using bidding, and this is audience network apps. So there's this strong growth compared to the years before. It also shows not only the adoption is growing, but there's also the trust and the types of accounts that are different. Today, 60% of the top 10 audience network publishers are using bidding. And if you take the entire publishers that are using bidding today, half of them generate more than 50% of their revenue through bidding. So not only we see that bidding adoption is growing in the market, but so the trust toward the product is growing because publishers are not testing anymore, but they're generating the majority of their revenue through bidding, which is a great achievement for those 50% of publishers that are already doing so. If we move to the next slide, so app bidding. So what does replacing waterfall with bidding ultimately mean for a publisher, and what are the benefits? The next slide will show us the 3 main benefits on how app bidding can transform your businesses. The first one, we discussed it already, an increase in revenue with real-time competition. This will depend on the current waterfall integration and setup that you have. This will depend on many different factors. We estimate that yes, you can have a gain in ARPDAU when we transition to bidding, but it can also be stable. And this can be a win as well because of the second point, that bidding can unlock operational efficiencies. So we discussed it as well before on how it's easier to maintain and manage the waterfall. And we've talked to few publishers in the industry, and it's available in our latest report. And the key area they mention on operational efficiency are more time to optimize app experiences, more freedom to integrate new demand partners easily, and ultimately more resources dedicated to drive user acquisition. Finally, and that's a point that's quite interesting and mentioned as well before, bidding can be used as a gateway to ads for new publisher or IP heavy publisher willing to experiment with ads. The promise of bidding lets you test easily and assure you make the most of in-app ads from day one without the operational burden and the unknowns related to your first launch. So the next slide is finally just showing the resources that are available to you as a developer. So you can find different documentation on our website that's appearing here. One is the essential app bidding guide that highlights like the 5 tips in order to start with bidding and make sure that you have the best integration. One of them is bid density. I haven't mentioned it before, but the more bidders you'll have and the easier it will get, and the more fairness and transparency you'll get from bidding. We also have a report, the new era in ad monetization report that shows the best practices from the publisher and the feedback from the publisher that have tested bidding to date. So I recommend you looking at those documents, and we can share them after the call. Now I'm going to hand over to Nimrod, that's going to discuss the evolution of ad monetization optimization.
Thanks, Mark. So Nimrod here. I'm VP Product at ironSource based out of Tel Aviv, Israel. Also oversees ironSource mediation activity, working closely also with our demand partners in the mediation, which are also participating in the bidding, including Facebook audience networks. We have a few interesting slides here. The first one in which we'll discuss the evolution of monetization optimization. So looking back at the where we started, somewhere I believe around in mobile ecosystem about 5 to 6 years ago, there was publishers actually used a single demand source, like a single SDK in most cases, in order to deliver ads. As you can see, it's that part on the left. So in terms of like the operational work, it was very limited because you have only single source, no much of optimization, if at all. In most cases, it was a rev share basis, so almost zero operations. While on the revenue was quite limited because there is only a single demand source with limited fill and lack of competition. The next step, and we're talking about more or less 4 years ago, developers are starting, maybe even 4.5, developers have started to use mediation platform to integrate several demand sources. The majority of them were like SDKs in order to increase competition. But that step operation increased slightly because the mediation platform provides with like ironSource provide with a mediation, like an optimization logic, which was almost like an automated optimization logic. Revenue went up as competition and fill rate grew, and things became better while operation cost was slightly higher. Then in order to, we had the deals phase in which ad networks would like to guarantee the supply access by committing on specific performance KPIs like ECPM and fill rate, which help them to build a greater supply sources in order to increase reach. So that when operations became a bit more complicated as publishers started to get and build the ad monetization teams to work with the different ad networks and make sure that those deals are being set correctly, managed correctly, meet the criteria, etc. So revenue went up while operations started to slightly increase. About 2.5 years ago, even like, yeah, around that time, multiple instances become, in a way, the standard in the market. Both networks and publishers found it like the base setup in order to increase competition as well as to increase revenue. And then revenue went up while the operation cost jumped really high because instead of a publisher that have like 4, 5, 6 demand sources in which he needs to manage on a daily basis or maybe a weekly basis, developers found themselves with a waterfall with dozens and sometimes even hundreds of different instances with different CPMs, prices, and requires a lot of optimization work in order to make sure that there is lots of competition on one hand, while on the other, there is not too much of a latency cost, etc., etc. The next part of the evolution is in-app bidding. And the in-app bidding promise, as you can see here, is actually that operation is dropping significantly where the revenue increases. And how come that makes sense? Because with in-app bidding, any demand source is competing over each impression, which actually means that competition is the highest that you can get. And you still use several demand sources, which actually also means that in terms of like fill rate, you should be in a very decent place. While on the operation side, actually things are now fully automated, right? Which in a sense means that no more daily optimization efforts, no more a challenging latency on a daily basis, and make sure that you're optimized. In a sense, pure bidding makes sure that you're optimized for each and every impression without running any work on your side, clearly not on a daily basis. Saying that, it's important to emphasize that what we refer like the bidding process actually means that you are using a 100% bidding stack, meaning that all the demand sources are bidding in real time. At the moment, that's not the way that the industry, that's on the stage in which the industry is today, meaning several demand sources are not providing with real-time bid as of today, which brings us to the hybrid solution, which in a way take us slightly into the in-app bidding phase with respect to operations and revenue efficiency, while on the other, we are still not fully there with respect to completely eliminate any operations cost on a daily or a weekly basis by the publisher. From here, I'm taking a bit of like a step back and making sure that it's clear how bidding exactly works and the mechanics behind it. In that simple video, we're trying to actually go through the simple ad request flow for an hybrid bidding solution. So when ad request comes to the server, the bidding sources are bidding in real time and provide with their bids, which are then compete with the static instances, which have their own static CPM, and allocates the bidding sources in the right place. In the example you see here, bidding source number 1 provide with the highest bid, which means that you won the impression and then serve the impression. In a different case, a traditional source, meaning a non-bidding source, will be able to win and then will grant the impression in case be able to fill that ad request. So actually, again, there is a full automation with respect to the revenue, making sure that for each and every ad request, the bidding sources are able to bid in real time and make sure that the competition is fair, transparent, and optimized towards the highest price. And the highest price wins alongside with a traditional waterfall. In that flow, I'll actually guide us through the entire funnel from the mediation initialization up to the ad impression. So in a hybrid in a bidding solution, the mediation is being initiated by the developer, which then initiate the network SDKs in order to make sure that the SDKs are ready to participate in the auction. And when an ad request comes, there is a client to server call, meaning the mediation SDK is called the server, the LevelPlay ironSource mediation solution, in that case, server, which then run a server to server auction in real time based on OpenRTB protocol. And actually in that, in hundreds of milliseconds, the auctions ends, meaning that the server knows who's the highest bids and should then grant the impression. It's merged with the traditional instances. We have a winning array, as we saw in the previous slide, which then sent from, from the server back to the client, and then the winning source is being cached. We then ready for the publisher to later on show the impression in that case. So here we see the device, again, call to the server. There is a real-time milliseconds action in order to identify the winner, send it back to the device, and then caching and add impression later on. I'll go through how an ultimate hybrid bidding waterfall setup should look like. Using that screenshot from the ironSource platform, we can see the different section of a hybrid waterfall. So at the top, we see here the bidding area. In that area, we see all the demand sources that are activate for that specific group. For bidding, in that example, we can see that Facebook, ironSource, Integral, AdColony, and Tapjoy are competing with bidding. Then we have the 3 tiers layout. In tier 1, which is recommended to be rarely in use, developers can set up instances to deliver on top of the other tiers. It's highly recommended to use that tier only in rare cases, as I mentioned, and which mainly should represent specific deals with demand sources. So for example, let's say that specific demand sources has a guaranteed deal for a specific, let's say, very high and lucrative CPM prices. In that case, it makes sense to set up that specific instance with a specific rate which defined in tier 1. That rate can be very higher number as an example in order to make sure it guarantees with all the impressions that it can get in case it chooses. Tier number 2 is the main tier, which actually is the one which you recommend to place all the, let's call it the core waterfall, meaning the non-bidding instances. Developers can choose different optimization logic. Well, in case of using LevelPlay in a bidding, it's highly recommended to simply use and sort by CPM logic. It's important to mention that in that case, developers can choose to either allocate a manual rate for a specific instance or use the ironSource automatic logic to set the ECPM for that instance based on historical performance. In the vast majority of cases, historical data is the most preferred way, because in that case, it supports some kind of fluctuations in performance and make sure that the waterfall is competitive and well updated at all times. While in some cases, in case there is either a new instance or a delay in data or anything like that, then a manual setup of rates is also an option. Last, we have tier number 3, which actually allows developers to manage a remnant activity here. Again, in most cases, it's unlikely to be used, but in some cases in which developers would like to have a specific source or sources to deliver only once the core waterfall has no fill, then developers can place here the instances and make sure they deliver only in case all the main tiers are responding with no availability. Raul, maybe it will be great to hear from you some of the tips and logic in which you are using in Amanotes to manage your waterfall today.
Sure, yeah. So as shown here, like we at Amanotes use the hybrid like the system that is provided by ironSource. And as Nimrod had mentioned, like we do employ the rate feature in some cases, but majority of our waterfalls still run on ECPM price. The rate we use mostly in cases where we see that some of the partners have a fluctuating ECPM, or whether their reporting has a delay or some issue, then we quickly switch them over to the rate so that we can ensure we capture the maximum revenue. An additional point is also when we try to optimize and maybe add more instances into the waterfall, we also employ the rate feature and try to use this to make sure that the impressions go to the right partners.
Thanks, Raul. I think that's what you just shared is a great example for like the most important fundamentals of how to manage your waterfall with actually, it's like you use bidding as much as you can, letting the instances be optimized by CPM, while in specific cases, you are using the manual setup in order to assign rates and make sure that the waterfall is fully optimized. Thanks for that. I'll go through some of the best practices for hybrid waterfall, which we're here at ironSource recommend developers to use. And number one is to adopt as much available demand sources as bidders. And the idea here is simple. Where we are aiming, and it seems like the industry is going there, which is the most efficient way, is all in through bidding. At the moment, not all demand sources can bid, while in order to enjoy the majorities of bidding, it's it's like highly recommended to use as much bidding source as you can, because it's quite like competition is going higher. There is less operation work, and actually the more sources you're adding to bidding, the less, the more you can enjoy the bidding goodies. On that part, we also have number 2, which is related in a way in which we are recommending to remove low share of voice demand sources. Again, it's almost about the same point. In order to increase competition, you like to get as much demand sources as you want, but on the other end, you don't want to work on a daily basis and optimize the waterfall and make sure that there is less latency and stuff like that. So in case there is a very small demand source in the waterfall, it's highly recommended to simply drop it in order to increase the value of bidding. On that front, it's the same in a way to a bidding demand source. Like I will say that like adding additional demand sources which are our bidders, in a sense, it makes sense because there is no lots of operations costs involved. While on the other side, in case that demand source has no significant share of voice, so it's just additional noises for your monetization activity. The third point is avoid manual override of the waterfall. Keep your waterfall sorted by CPM. Again, it's almost about the same point. The idea is to increase automation, reduce manual operations, and make sure that you optimize at all time. In case you use manual overrides, you may cause a situation in which the waterfall is not optimized, which then decrease the competition and may affect your bottom line revenue. And you're required to have more management and more operations to make sure that at all time you are well optimized. Saying that, you may use rate function in case it's the right setup. As we reviewed in the previous slide, for example, a new instance in which has no historical data, it makes full sense to manually set up its rates, make sure that it's well optimized in the waterfall, it's competing in the right place, it increases your revenue, and then later on, after a day or 2 or 3, you can feel comfortable to drop the rate and go back to number 3, which is enjoying the ECPMs. Last part, which is mainly the most important one for existing publishers which are already utilizing waterfall, is to A/B test. Same as any other decision-making process in your applications, specifically with monetization, as well as bidding, it's highly recommended to run like a true A/B test in order to make sure that bidding is the right thing for you and your decisions are being based on actual data. Maybe Mark, you would like to share more insights from Facebook perspective on that point?
Yeah. I think we've run like we've seen many A/B tests over the last few years on bidding. It's important to look at the right metrics as well. So obviously CPM used to be the de facto metric back in the days. It's not the case today. We're looking at the average ARPDAU, and when I say average, it's not at network level, but really at app level, and that's extremely important because we've been metrics can fluctuate. Like Facebook audience network might generate less revenue or more. It depends on the cases. CPMs might fluctuate because you win more impressions at lower CPMs, so the CPMs might go down. That's not important. What really matters is how much average additional revenue you're making, and that's going through the ARPDAU. So we don't recommend as well post tests. They usually always there's always an issue. Let's be clear about it. There's always a seasonality change, or because it's the end of month changes, etc. So we do definitely recommend an A/B test. And the way we've been seeing publisher going through them is it depends on your portfolio of apps, but definitely run one for your first app, for your second app, and it will increase your confidence and show you that bidding is working and bidding is creating the same or additional revenue, which will then create the trust to launch and hopefully scale to the entire portfolio of apps. And I want to emphasize as well the first point, to adopt all the available bidders. I think that's something really, really key to assure that first we transition the industry as a whole, and we can start generating the highest competition for your waterfall, and hopefully generate the highest revenue for your apps.
Thanks, Mark. I think you nailed all the important part. Like, when looking as a product manager, looking at A/B tests, I think that one of the main fundamentals for using A/B testing for decision making is that the fact that you just you make sure that you drop the option of making the wrong call. So like in many cases and many decisions that we're making, I mean, we know that we are going there, and we know that's the right decision, but once it's backed with the data, it makes things very easy, and then you're no longer looking back. And we see it like together with like each and every publisher that are using A/B tests, and in the vast majority of cases, bidding or in a hybrid solution wins over traditional. Then from that point moving on, it's very easy to look only straight and keep on going, and stop looking back and just think of like maybe you made the wrong decision. How do I start with bidding? And I also saw a few questions on the chat with respect to that. So I'll divide here the answer to two types of developers which are already live with ad monetization to date with waterfalls, and developers which are new to ad monetization. So developers which are running today with waterfall, so they are clearly used to it. It's very fragile. The performance, lots of models in many cases are based on performance, and we like to make sure that again they are taking the right decision and the transition is performed on the right way. In that case, it's quite simple. Simply log to your account at ironSource. You configure the bidding networks, right? So you create like a dedicated instance for them. There is a bidding section. It's barely easy. And then you run what we mostly recommend to run like a quick bidding test, and you determine if bidding is the right for you. Quick bidding test is a very simple process in which by a click, the ironSource platforms actually divided your traffic into two audiences, like 50-50. One audience is simply use the traditional waterfall with all the networks as it is, and the other group, which is the big group, the testing group, is the hybrid waterfall, which means that the networks which are configured as bidding are running here as bidders, and the networks which are not supporting as bidding, meaning they're not configured as bidding, are still running based on instances, which means that that group is a combination of both bidding and non-bidding networks, competing in a hybrid mode. Then in the platform itself, you can measure the impact in terms of ARPDAU, and also all the other metrics like impressions, ECPMs, engagement rate, etc., etc. And also from your perspective, if you run that test for a decent time, which we recommend about 2 weeks, it also helps you understand in a way the operations effect, right? So for example, for the bidding networks, you will find yourself not required to perform changes in the B group, while in the A group, you may require to do so in case you like to perform changes in the waterfall. Then actually, in case you decided that bidding is the right thing for you, meaning like hybrid setup, you are choosing the B group, which then becomes the one and only configuration for that app. And from that point, you can move and expand bidding for your entire portfolio. In case you find that bidding is not the right thing for you, which may happen in rare situations, so you may keep with the current waterfall. You can choose whatever the right thing for you. For new publishers, so our recommendation at ironSource is to launch with bidding for since day one. Same for existing publishers with new applications. When say bidding, clearly I'm referring to a hybrid solution, as not all demand sources may support that you may use may support bidding. the main reason for that is that as of today, bidding like hybrid solution is winning in the vast majority of cases. So in case you're in a situation that you still didn't build your waterfall completely, so maybe you can skip that point and start with a hybrid setup since day one, meaning that like the process is very simple. You sign up to the ironSource platform, you get in touch with the ironSource team, they enable bidding for your account, and then you can begin monetization with hybrid setup since the day one of the app, since launch, and it's very easy. And in parallel, we are working to streamline the entire process and make sure you will not even require to reach to anyone in order to get live with bidding. You can simply log in and get bidding live. From here, I'm handing it to Rahul to share with us the Amanotes success story with LevelPlay.
Thank you, Nimrod. So I'm Rahul Ravindranath. I'm the current monetization specialist for Amanotes. And just some background about us. We're like the #1 music game publisher at the moment. And we just reached 1 billion downloads recently. And these are some of our top apps right here. And majority of these are running bidding right now. So on the next slide. Yep. So why in-app bidding and why is it so important to us? So the key point over here is that majority of our revenue model is based on the ad monetization, and all of our products are running majority from ad monetization. And there were 3 key reasons why we were super excited about in-app bidding. The first one is obviously the resources needed to optimize the waterfalls. As we have a portfolio of a lot of apps, this required multiple waterfalls in multiple geos, and it required a lot of hours to maintain and optimize and to work with the partners to find the right price, find the right call. So this was the first thing that we were really excited about, even if it didn't bring any uplift. But the second point, which is that we were also looking for ways to bring uplift to our current performance and our monetization. And this is the second point that was the promise from in-app bidding. And the third one is on the fairness of competition. So one of the things with the traditional waterfall that we saw was that we needed to prioritize some partners over others and focus some partners in different parts of the waterfall compared to others. But what in-app bidding does is that we were able to provide each of our partners a fair opportunity to get a look into our inventory and place the highest price. So what we found actually is that the first point is we were really excited about this, and we just rolled out whenever we had a partner ready on in-app bidding. We didn't do any A/B test initially, and we just looked for the before-after testing, and we saw small incremental uplift in the performance for most of the products. Additionally, each time we transition one of the partners over to the bidding, we could avoid optimizing it in the future, and this saved us a lot of time, as mentioned in the previous slide. So finally, once we had all of our key partners on in-app bidding, we were able to do an A/B test with the help of ironSource. And we were able to see, as Nimrod mentioned, in Group A, just the manual instances, the waterfall as we designed previously. And in Group B, we were able to allocate traffic to the bidding ad networks, and also the ad networks without bidders on manual floor prices, so the hybrid model. And there were 3 key things that we wanted to see, like observe the full impact of bidding as a whole, while all the partners are competing in the bidding stack. The second one was to see how we could optimize in the future based on ad network preferences and how each ad network behaved in the bidding environment compared to the hybrid environment, compared to the fully manual environment. And with one of our top apps, Dancing Road, we were able to see a 14% uplift in the bidding group compared to the manual group. And this looked very promising. And we were able to look at a geo level and see that one of the key insights that we got is for some of the countries that we are not able to optimize due to the amount of workload, we see a bigger uplift that in-app bidding brings, because we're able to optimize in every country, and each of the ad networks are able to bid for the highest price. So that was one of the key insights that we got as well from this A/B test. And we also got a lot of information about each of the ad networks and how they behave best. Yep. So that's it for the case study from my side. Quite happy now.
Great. Thank you, Rahul, Mark, and Nimrod. Really great insights here. I already see we have a lot of questions coming in, so let's start making our way through them. First question we have for Mark. Mark, when do you think the industry is going to be ready to move to an 100% bidding environment?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel if we look at the hybrid model, it's ready now. Yes, we are still at different stages with some partners, but to be fair, like and you share, like we can pretty much approve most publisher to move to bidding from the Facebook Audience Network perspective, and you can easily create the hybrid setup. Nimrod mentioned as well that the ironSource team was working on making it more widely available to all developers. So it's ready. There were and there are two blockers when we discuss with publishers about bidding. The first one is usually what we hear is that bidding is tech heavy and it's a difficult integration. This is not the case anymore. I think it might have been the case initially when we started bidding in 2017, when you were running into like the first test of trials of bidding. Today, it's really a few clicks on the platform and it's actually quite easy to transition from a waterfall setup to an hybrid setup. The second one, and I think that one answers the question on when we'll be ready to move to a 100% bidding environment, is the demand density and the demand partners that are available for bidding. Today, the blocker to move to full bidding is just that some of the major demand sources, few of them, are still haven't moved the transition to bidding. So it's up to it's in a chicken and egg situation. Should I wait until the demand sources are all available, or should I go into an hybrid setup? The hybrid setup still brings value, as we see overall, and we just saw with Rahul's example. And we can definitely like launch the hybrid setup and push those demand sources that are currently still not bidding to do so. So I think it's we are doing our work there. I think it's also from the publisher side up to you to discuss with those demand sources and try to push them to move to bidding if you're already satisfied with the hybrid setup. And finally, yeah, everyone will. The most important thing again is to prove the value of bidding, and to A/B test is a way to make sure that bidding works. And when it will work, you'll move to an hybrid. It will mean that you're in a hybrid setup, and hopefully this will lead the way for the full transition when everyone will be ready to bid.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Another question here, actually, I see it's repeating, so let's ask it next. Nimrod, why don't you take this one? What's going to be the impact of iOS 14 on in-app bidding?
Great question. I guess it's clearly the hot topic for Q3 2020. So iOS 14 is a big question and a really I'll say an exciting evolution in our industry. With respect to in-app bidding, so the question is more broader about monetization. And it's still very early to say. On that part, I will share from my point of view, we should expect that the vast majority of significant demand sources will be able to keep their deliverables in iOS 14, meaning that in case you are using, let's say, 4 to 6 SDK networks, so the majority of them, the tier 1 networks, will remain delivering in iOS 14. These were the other. So the main question is about performance. In that case, again, it's still very early to say, and I even don't want to try and predict how the different ad networks or demand sources will let's say, run in terms of like optimization with iOS 14. On that front, I think that I can share, like, all of us believe that there is expected, it's going to be like interesting time, and I'll say we can expect a fluctuations in performance, as well as in fill rate. So for example, maybe in specific geos, specific demand source will have less fill, maybe the prices will be lower. And in that front, I find bidding is actually the most recommended setup. Because one of the challenges in iOS 14 is clearly on the marketing front, right? How you are managing your user acquisition activity, and make sure that you keep things as much as usual as you can. While on the monetization side, what we know also from the past is when there is a fluctuation in prices, it's starting to create lots of takes lots of your attention, and you find yourself optimizing on a daily basis, right? So the performance is dropping. Like, you start to ask yourself, is it because something is wrong with the waterfall? Then you tweak with it. Then it's fine, but maybe you have too much latency, and it's very hard to actually measure the performance. While with bidding, what's interesting is that in a way, you know that you are optimized for each and every ad impression. So maybe the performance will go slightly down for a week or 2 or 4 weeks, and then goes slightly up. We also saw that in the COVID time, in the early days, right? There was fluctuation in prices, lots of rumors in the market about exactly how the ECPMs across the globe, how they affect this country or the other. Well, developers which use bidding, they actually knew that they are well optimized, and then yes, prices may goes down, but they are like well optimized and making sure that they are yielding the most out of the situation. And with iOS 14, I actually believe that developers should transition as much as they can right now to bidding before iOS 14, in order to make sure that once iOS 14 become available, and we're talking about mid-September more or less, they will be able to at least know that they're like optimized on the monetization stack, and then they can use their time and attention to focus on other things, which are like marketing and user acquisition operations, knowing that the monetization stack is well optimized, and they are guaranteed with the best performance over each and an impression. That's overall how I see the effect. I don't think in a way that bidding, it's still early to say, but I don't believe that demand sources will stop supporting bidding, or bidding may break or even become even less efficient. Actually, it's if we think about instances and demand sources in the waterfall, this way or the other, they're buying impressions in this granularity or the other, and the demand sources already have the ability to buy the impressions. So again, I believe that bidding will keep work in the same way that it is, and will allow developers to enjoy automation and make sure that they are well optimized in this, I'll say, interesting and expected to be maybe fluctuated time in terms of performance.
Awesome, great answer. Thanks, Nimrod. Next question, Rahul, is for you. What ultimately made you switch to in-app bidding?
Yeah, so we have 2 key reasons why we switched to in-app bidding. We've been waiting for in-app bidding for a long time, and we've been looking at it for over a year now. And the first thing is that we wanted to make sure that the technology was there first, so that everything was ironed out and the system was working really well. The second point is that we were also looking for multiple partners to join the bidding, as Mark had mentioned as well. With the bidding density, the more partners that we have in the bidding stack, the better the performance is from the bidding as well. So when we get our partners working on bidding as well, we're more than excited to join this. So that's why we transitioned over to in-app bidding.
Awesome. And actually, there's another one for you, asking, how is Amanotes working with ECPM floors?
So at the moment, we employ both the bidding with the ad networks and for the floors, especially for the partners where we cannot use bidding, we set up multiple calls to them with different prices to ensure that we can maximize the revenue that we get from these ad partners. Additionally, we also do optimization on a regular basis to change the price depending on the season and to also optimize on the performance based on the change from the demand side as well.
Nice, thanks. Nimrod, next one for you. Would you recommend adding all the networks at once or testing one at a time?
Good question. In most cases, we recommend to use to test bidding, meaning like hybrid setup versus a waterfall. It's more of a question of like, is the bidding setup is the right thing for me, rather than asking if for that specific demand source bidding is better for me. It's quite often it's hard to test each and every demand source for bidding. Saying that, I believe the developers should work with their also demand sources and make sure that they are aware of their transition to bidding in case there may be something that may come up. In most cases, we don't recommend to gradually test them one after the other. It may take clearly a long time, and also in order to get statistically a clear answer, in some cases the adjustment may be very low. So for example, if there is a specific demand source that, let's say, takes 7% share of voice, so let's say it's more efficient with bidding, but overall in terms of performance, it will be very hard to really make sure that it's the right call. Also in operation cost, like how significant is it to transition a single network to bidding? Not that big, right? But if you're transitioning 2, 3, 4 networks, then it becomes quite significant, both on the performance side as well as the operation. So going back to my first step, I believe that testing them one by one, it makes sense more from a QA standpoint. Make sure that, like, in terms of like making sure that assuring the quality is good and there is nothing wrong going with that specific network with bidding, which is less important for today because we as a mediation platform already take care of that and making sure that all the networks which are available through bidding are working in a healthy way through the bidding integration. And you should focus with the A/B manual on performance and making sure that this is the right setup for you, which will be much more recommended to test it in a bulk for all the demand sources.
And if I could add to that, I think the behavior from individual bidders might be different depending on how many bidders you have in a group. So that's another point that we would miss out if you roll out individual bidders one by one. And that's primarily the reason why we decided to do an A/B test at the end, to see the cumulative effect of all the bidders working together.
Awesome, thanks both. Mark, we have the next one for you. Is it possible to get higher revenue with an optimized waterfall rather than bidding? And are there any such examples?
Yeah, so I mean, it's first of all, I think bidding can drive the same revenue and not necessarily higher revenue than waterfall. So that's important because it's happening. Nevertheless, like if we look at the different tests that we did in the past, it was possible for some very specific reason to see higher revenue in the waterfall setup than on the hybrid setup. But there's always a reason. There's always a reason why it didn't happen. Sometimes it can be technical, related to the SDK version that is not compatible. Sometimes it can be related from the question that was just answered to the amount of bidders and the bid density that's available. And sometimes it's just you enable just one bidder that represents a very low share of voice of your entire stack. So it won't move the needle, and you might still see higher revenue from the waterfall side. So it can happen, but that's probably, it goes against the logic of bidding, and there's probably a good reason for it that we can help you investigate. So I wouldn't be, yeah, I will just run the A/B test and then reach out to us if this happens, but hopefully it shouldn't. Nimrod, Rahul, if you want to add something on that front.
No, I think you nailed it quite well. I think that we did find a situation in which developers were like very highly optimized, and then in a sense, bidding shows not a drastic situation like increasing performance. Well, we see that rarely. The other way around, it's very rare, and in the long term, we believe that it's not going that direction.
Cool. Nimrod, for you, what's the typical percentage of share of voice and ad revenue for all the bidders?
So depends on how many demand sources are you using which are supporting bidding. But in most cases, we see between 25 to 70% of bidding share of voice using current bidding networks, in case embracing, let's say, the tier ones, at least the tier ones demand sources in that list.
Okay. Rahul, this one maybe you can answer. Someone's asking, would you say that in-app bidding reduces the requirement to manage individual territories?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in my case study as well, one of the key things is also as we have to operate with mediation, and we have to prioritize the number of, sometimes it's the number of products, sometimes it's the number of countries that we need to optimize for. Usually our efforts are not equally spread out, and therefore one of the key things that we notice with bidding is that this helps us avoid that issue where the bidders can take over and show uplift where we previously were not optimizing well, or did not even optimize in some countries, and the bidders help us to make to close that gap and to show the optimum performance there.
Awesome. Thank you, Rahul. It actually looks like we're out of time. We're at exactly an hour now. So we'll close for now. If you guys have questions, you can feel free to reach out to us. I know there's some we didn't get to. And that's it. We're going to be sending out the video tomorrow as well as the slides. Remember, we have the form in the chat if it's relevant to you guys. And we'll say goodbye for now. So thank you to Nimrod, Rahul, and Mark. It was really great chatting. And that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very
everyone.
much for having me.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.